Well, good morning all. Delighted to have you here. This is an auspicious day for the Toledo Museum of Art. For many decades we've sought a great painting by Frans Hals, one of the three great painters of the Dutch 17th century. Hals, along with Rembrandt and Vermeer, defines that century, but there were many great artists, and the Toledo Museum of Art has great paintings by many of them. In fact, we have the only civic group by a Dutch artist outside of Holland, which is our Thomas de Keyser painting. What this museum is defined by, and around the world known for, because of all the loans that we've made over many decades, is the quality of its collection. And so this work is qualitatively very important and worth waiting for. The Toledo Museum of Art would rather wait than buy second rate. And this particular work has a number of qualities to it. Frans Hals was a great portraitist and group portraitist. And this was the first of 4 family portraits that he made, and the earliest of them, and the last of them remaining in private hands. The painting itself is a delight. Hals was a master of the use of paint and fluidity and colors, and especially his dreamy and variety of blacks captivated other artists and still does. This painting was purchased entirely with private funds, which were donated to this museum for the purpose of acquiring works of art. We can't spend that money on anything else, and it's important that we spend it wisely. We were fortunate that during the course of the process of acquiring this work, which has taken over a year, we received a bequest from somebody who was very, very fond of this museum, Jill Ford Murray. And her bequest was used towards the purchase of this painting, as was funds from the Libby bequest and other funds from the Libby family. Their gift to this museum is not only the museum itself, but many great works of art that we have in the collection. Now, the work of art is unveiled today for the media, and then it will come back on view on October the 13th, Thursday, when we will invite the emeritus curator of the Frans Hals Museum in Haarlem, in the Netherlands, who's a great expert on Hals and helped us with this acquisition, will come here to the Peristyle to give a public talk, which has been sponsored by our Toledo Museum of Art ambassadors. And I invite you to come on October 13th to what will undoubtedly be a large audience to hear a great expert about this painting. But we also have an in-house great expert on Dutch art, somebody who for quite a number of decades has studied Dutch art. In particular, he is really the expert on Goltzius, but somebody capable of recognizing a Frans Hals from the other side of a room, even when not told what it is. And that's my way of introduction to our resident expert, our curator of European art, Dr. Larry Nichols, and please congratulate him.
I'm more than a little thrilled, to say the least, to say a few remarks about the Toledo Museum of Art's new acquisition, Frans Hals's family portrait in a landscape. And the first observation I want to make is that the Toledo Hals we present today is a collection changer. In 1908, Edward Drummond Libby, the founder of this museum, acquired on the New York market a lozenge-shaped canvas, The Flute Player, and he would leave it to the collection at his death in 1925. Though Libby made many sterling acquisitions, our early Rembrandt, our Turner, Constable, and Manet, The Flute Player, alas, was not one of them. In 1959, the bogus signature was removed from the canvas, and the monogram, that is, the book, the catalog on Hals, published in 1970 by the Hals expert and still wonderfully with us 90-plus-year-old Professor Seymour Slive. He cataloged it as the the follower of Hals, and shortly thereafter, the museum removed the work from display, and thus began what has been a decades-long search for a great, not good, but great painting by Frans Hals, a picture worthy of the collection here. In my almost 19 years of serving as curator of the European paintings collection here, this museum has monitored the art market closely for Hals as he remained high on our wish list. Delightfully, it was Lady Luck herself who brought Family Portrait in a Landscape to my attention. For in July of 2010, while in London for a planning meeting for an exhibition on Edward Manet, that the museum will present, opening in fact exactly 1 year from today, October 4th, 2012, I was in a dealer's gallery to request the loan of a work by Manet. And to my sheer astonishment, there on the wall in front of me also hung this very painting. As I emailed shortly thereafter, Brian Kennedy, the newly named but not yet started director here, something truly unanticipated and quite overwhelming has transpired that has me maniacally preoccupied and intensely focused. The rest is history. Brian has made this acquisition happen, and Hals's Family Portrait now has a TMA accession number. Quite simply, Hals was one of the greatest portraitists of all times, with Rembrandt represented twice in paintings in our fine collection, and the rare Johannes Vermeer. Hals was one of the three giants, as Brian has said, of Dutch 17th century painting. Though Hals on occasion quite successfully delved into the domain of genre painting, Hals was and is renowned for his portraiture, be it dashing single figures of the Dutch middle class, such as the great Laughing Cavalier of 1624 in the Wallace collection in London, which my colleague Walter Liedtke at the Met has pointed out the sitter neither is laughing or a cavalier, but no matter, it's a great painting, and also from exactly the same date we think as the now Toledo Hals. Hals also painted single figures paired with the spouse of the sitter, so it could be Mr. and Mrs. on figures left and right of a doorway or whatever. He also engaged in group portraits, the most famous being his large Haarlem civic portraits, civic guard companies of beginning in 1616 and running through to 1639. Wonderfully, Hals also took up the tradition of family portraiture. 4 have survived, and as Brian has noted, ours was the earliest painted by Hals that has survived, and also was the last in private hands, having come from the family collection of the Viscount Boyne, where it had been owned since the early 19th century. Some numbers for you. There are about 220 paintings by Hals known, approximately 20 or 25 more from archival records, and more are being discovered as research continues. Curiously, however, the identity of the sitters, that is, those individuals portrayed, is known in only less than 1/2 the cases of Hals' portraiture. Hals was born in Antwerp, present-day Belgium, in about 1582 or 83, the son of a cloth merchant. With his family, he settled in Haarlem as a young boy of age 4 or 5. Little, however, though, is known of his life. We know nothing of his education. There are no surviving letters. We do know he never ventured to Italy. He did, however, travel to Antwerp to study the art of that great city where Rubens and Jordaens, I gesture to 2 wonderful pictures in our own collection, artists still active. He joined the Haarlem Painters Guild in 1610. His first dated painting is from 1611, and in 1616 he made his first Haarlem Civil Guard picture, which really put him very much on the map. He was the portrait painter in Haarlem at this time. We know the individual married twice. His first wife, alas, died only after 4 or 5 years, having borne him 3 children. His second wife bore him no less than 11, so the man fathered at least 14 children. He encountered financial difficulties throughout his life, and he died destitute. He's buried in the St. Bavo's, the Grote Kerk in Haarlem. He died in 1666 at the ripe old age of 84 years. Turning now our attention to the new acquisition, In the early 1620s, in Haarlem, it was only natural that an individual wanting his or her family portrait rendered would turn to Hals. And what an achievement the patron received. Hals depicts the mother and father and 7 children in a landscape, and around them are sibling dramas playing out. The tenderness of the couple is certainly captured by Hals. I'd call your attention to the language of hands. Look at gesture, look at glances, look at the father engaging us, look at certain figures looking out of the composition. Hals is contriving how to depict this family and communicate who they are to us 400 years later. In the lower left is a very interesting story I want to share. This couple gave birth to another child after the completion of this painting. The painting is datable to the early 1620s. After it's finished, another child is born. What does the couple do? The kid has to get included in the picture. What do? You ask Hals, presumably, won't you add another child? For whatever reason, and we do not know why, Hals wasn't the painter of this 10th child. A very fine artist named Solomon de Bry painted this last inclusion in the composition and dates it right on the child's shoe, 1628. It's certainly in a different style. Possibly he was trying to emulate Hals, but plainly came up a little short in that regard. Now, another interesting story about this painting is we know the picture actually was cut at some point. Look at the gestures and glances. I deliberately cited this earlier on. Some of the attention within the composition addresses the viewer's attention outside the composition. In the early 20th century, it was supposed that our picture and one in the Brussels Museum that has 3 children and a wonderful goat cart may have once been one composition. And then in 1969, Seymour Slave proved that that was the case in a fine professional article in a journal. What happened is that at some point, when we know it to have taken place prior to the mid-18th century, at some point the canvas was cut. We do not know why. Pragmatism often reigns in this regard. It may well have been simply the painting didn't fit on a wall, believe it or not. I mean, we can't imagine cutting a work of art like this today, but that could have been what drove that action. What we do know wonderfully, and due to recent research, is the family identity. Only recently this has been established, the result of archival research by Pieter Biesboer, who Brian Kennedy mentioned is a Hals expert, and we're very happy to have him with us on October 13th for a free public Master Series lecture. Biesboer has identified that the family is that of the cloth merchant from Leiden who settled in Haarlem a few years just prior to this painting, one Giesbert Klaaszoon van Kampen. He married Maria Joris' dochter. They were married in 1604. They had children. That's Peter in the upper left. I have a son named Peter. That's Cornelis in the middle at the right. It's speculated that Hals painted this on commission of the family, perhaps acknowledging their 20th wedding anniversary. I know Biesboer will tell us more about the family history when he's with us next week. Why is this Hals a great painting? Well, I submit his genius is in twofold manners. His compositional structure is just fabulously coordinated. We look at this as if it's a snapshot of reality, but of course it's a contrived composition and highly thought out in the studio. And then as Brian was speaking to, the wonderful bravura virtuoso brushwork of Hals. And it was in fact Van Gogh who made that great quote that Brian was referencing. Frans Hals must have had 27 blacks. But not only a great painter with blacks, as Manet so adored too, he also was a remarkable colorist. But more to the point, what makes this painting so exciting? Why is Hals's portraiture so thrilling? He animates his individuals. They have individual character, whereas previously conformity to a type of rendering was common. Hals brings something new, and that's in large measure the whole nature of what genius is. One contemporary would write about him about his art, when seen from a distance, his portraits seem to lack nothing but life itself. I'm convinced that the associative powers of art will make Hals's family portrait resonate with our audiences. We all, those of you in this room, those of you around the world watching this on a webcast, we all have associative experiences with family, be it our own parents or looking down in the generational run of time. I have 3 remarkable children, and when I look at this painting, I think of that. I first spoke to the board of directors of this museum on the 6th of June. That happened to have been my wedding anniversary, and I was thinking of my gem of a wife at that very time. And just last night, at the museum's board meeting, I had the honor of sitting at a table with a gentleman who into foster care with his twin sister at birth and then adopted at age 2, only learned of and subsequently met his 7 biological siblings at age 59. Believe me, he thoroughly relished this picture that we celebrate here today. And I know our visitors, for their own reasons, for generations to come, will as well. Thank you. And Kelly, would you like to coordinate any questions anyone might have?